Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode, and today we are going to build a special little habitat which is connected to a restaurant called Dine with Dimetrodon. So let's get started. So far we've built two, or let's better say three habitats for the zoo, which is called the Jurassic Zoological Garden. And for the zoo, I wanted to basically have, once you've entered the entrance building or stepped into the actual zoo, that you right from the beginning see some dinosaurs. So those are the Homalocephali, the Moros intrepidus, and the Compsognathus. And afterwards, I wanted to have a little area where people can eat, where they can maybe buy souvenirs, maybe have like a little coffee shop where they can grab a drink to go for when they taking a stroll through the zoo, and like toilets and stuff like that. So have like a little guest area where they can buy stuff, go to the toilet and stuff like that. And I also wanted to include a habitat, obviously, for the next episode. I didn't want to have a episode where I was just building like guest facilities. I thought that would be maybe a little bit too boring. So I thought to build a habitat and connect it with that. And I thought about a restaurant where you would have a terrace where you can overlook a habitat. And since there would be a terrace, I thought it would be also nice to connect it with water, so there would be water in front of the terrace. And so I wanted to have something like that, maybe even a waterfall. I yet didn't even play around with the like waterfall feature in this game, so I also wanted to try that. And when I was looking through all of the dinosaurs that I have in this game, I thought, or I saw the Dimetrodon, and I immediately thought about Dine with Dime or Dine with Dimetrodon, and I thought it was really fitting to have like a little rhyme. I saw someone on YouTube, I don't know who exactly it was, who built like a coffee shop with the Compsognathus, which was called Coffee with Compy, and I thought that was really cute. So I wanted to make something similar, maybe if possible, and since I saw the Dimetrodon and I immediately thought about that, and because it would be really fitting with like the water feature, the waterfall, and the terrace overlooking the whole habitat, I thought that the Dimetrodon would be a really nice choice for that, since they are interesting to look at. They are not like a ginormous animal like the Suchomaimos or something like that, and something a little bit more chill yet still exciting. So I thought it would be perfect for the like little project that I had going on. And I also immediately found a really nice picture on Pinterest for, I don't even know what exactly this building was for, but I took like really good inspiration from that. And basically the backside, or like the side where you have the terrace and overlooking the habitat, this side is pretty much the same as the building that I saw online, but I did add the terrace, so the original building didn't have that. And I think it was also like the front of the building, actually, what is now the back for my building. But nevertheless, I thought it looked really cool. And we also had like the perfect wall pieces that I used. These are like with the wooden slabs, so I could only use like one wall piece, which was already relatively detailed, and I could use that for the whole building, which was really nice. So the building isn't too piece heavy or too complicated for me to build. So that actually took me, I believe, maybe 1.5 hours just for like the building itself and the terrace, which is honestly really good. And then I did just some little bits around the building, which I also did all off camera, so you don't really see that, but you will see it in the finished video. It was just like a little bit around with some foliage and stuff like that, and a sign where you see that you'll go to the Dine with Dimetrodon. So you see that later, but the building itself wasn't like overly complicated. Also, these beams that I'm building right now were actually relatively easy to build, and they are somewhat of an eye catcher for this building. I think these make this building just much more interesting, and I just think that the restaurant itself and especially the terrace turned out really well. I'm really happy with the results, so definitely let me know what you think in the very end and tell me in the comments if you like this building or not. You will also find the restaurant itself in the workshop. You will find the workshop code down in the description. This time it's actually just the building of the restaurant and not the whole habitat. What I found is that uploading habitats onto the workshop is maybe a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit weird because you don't have like the terrain tools, or if I've used like any sort of terrain tools in the habitat, they will also not be copied when you put the blueprint down in your zoo. Also the height of the terrain, so if I somehow change the terrain itself, if it's not super flat, it's also really weird. And so I personally think that habitats that are a little bit more detailed and more intricate, especially when it comes to the terrain, that it's not best to actually upload them onto the workshop, which I think is such a pity because I'd love to upload my habitats, but especially with this one where you will need to play around a lot with the terrain tools, especially because of the water, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because it will probably just be super frustrating for someone downloading my blueprint and then needing forever to get the terrain just right so that everything makes sense that is in the habitat, especially with like waterfalls and stuff like that. So I actually did not upload the whole habitat this time. You will find the restaurant shell. There's no like actual functioning restaurant in there, but you can use it as a shell, and if you like you can put a restaurant inside, which should be the smallest size, I believe. I don't think that the bigger sizes are going to fit in there. But at the same time, if you're going to place a restaurant inside, you can't really manipulate the terrain close enough to get like the finished result so that it looks like in my building, because I don't have a restaurant inside, so I can manipulate the terrain closer to the restaurant to actually make it deep enough and to place the water close enough, because if there would be a restaurant inside, I could not place the deep water close enough for my liking. So you can definitely try around if you want to. You don't of course have to rebuild my habitat. You can build differently. You don't even need to place deep water in front of the terrace. You can also just place like regular water or no water at all and just have like some smaller species running around really close to the terrace, and you would just need to of course manipulate the terrain a little bit around the terrace or around the whole building. But it's definitely much easier than when I would have uploaded the whole habitat and you would need to place everything in there or play around with the tools so it would fit. I just think that this time it's just much better. I was thinking about actually uploading the whole zoo to the workshop at some point when it's a little bit more finished, or not technically finished, but definitely further on in the building process. And I believe that when I have uploaded the zoo, that I can like update it when I'm saving it, so you'll always have like an updated version, or that I can occasionally, maybe like, I don't know, once a month or so, can update the blueprint for the whole zoo that you can find on the workshop, so that you can then have the whole zoo to play with, or to look at, to copy stuff out of it. So I definitely there need your opinion if you even want to have a whole zoo that you can visit. If it's just to look at, to walk through it, to copy things and stuff. So I am thinking about doing it like that, since uploading habitats is a little bit difficult right now. For the restaurant, once you come close to the actual restaurant or to the entrance, you could either walk into the restaurant through the main entrance and be like inside of the restaurant and take a seat there, or you can then walk out to the terrace area, or you can directly go from the outside of the building to the left, and then you would have this like wooden pathway through like a tiny artificial garden and walk down to the terrace, so you would have like the most perfect and undisturbed view onto the habitat from the Dimetrodon. So that's what I was building here. It's just really simple. In the end, I also just placed some succulents onto this like stony plant bed. I wanted to keep it relatively simple and almost like a little bit also dry or arid. The habitat for the Dimetrodon will be also relatively arid besides the actual water, obviously. So I kind of wanted to have that on like the whole outside area in front of the building. I used the wetlands terrain brush and also mixed in a little bit of this like regular temperate biome brush. I wanted to give like the illusion that you're going into a more wetlands area that would be a little bit more fitting, since you will have a relatively big water area inside the habitat. So I kind of wanted to already give the guest the theming of this area, but not like overdo it, because we are not like in a swamp or anything, but I wanted to keep it a little bit more like wetlandy. So I did that in like the closest area to the restaurant, and the rest will still be like a temperate biome. Since the zoo itself is located in a temperate biome, I didn't want to overdo it and have like ginormous wetland areas in the whole area. I generally am not so sure if I should keep the areas between buildings and habitats like really compact, so that you are going like from habitat to habitat, similar to like actual zoos, or if I should leave them a little bit more open, where you would have like a lot of greenery, where you can walk past, more similar to like the Jurassic Park. There's like not habitat next to habitat next to habitat. It's a bit more open and almost like a woodlands where you're walking or driving through. So I'm not quite sure where I want to go with this zoo. Maybe I want to do something like in between, or depending on the area. I'm also already thinking about how to incorporate these like guest drives, where you are driving around with the cars looking at the habitats, since especially a little bit later on the habitats will get much bigger because we are working with much bigger animals. I think to have like this whole distance just for walking would be maybe a little bit too much, so I definitely want to incorporate these drives, and not technically only through the habitats itself, but also on like the outside of the habitats. I'm not sure how exactly to do it, because you cannot cross like the regular path with the driving path, I'm gonna call it. So that will possibly take quite some planning ahead to actually make it work so that the pathing also makes sense. Maybe I will build like little bridges if it doesn't work out, but the bridges I believe won't be functional for the guests, or at least I right now don't really know how to make functional bridges. Maybe there's like a tutorial out there on YouTube, I should check that out, but right now I don't really know. And this is like nothing that is going to be like super close in the future, but I am honestly already thinking about it, just planning ahead a little bit where the journey for this whole zoo is going. But coming back to the actual habitat for the Dimetrodon, obviously we do have quite a large deep water area. I wanted to have like a little bit under 50% of the whole habitat should be water. And we have this little waterfall feature in the back that you can see from the terrace or from the restaurant. And the lake that is like on top where the water from the waterfall is actually coming from is going to be included in a habitat. I don't have any specific plans on how to actually incorporate that or what habitat or what dinosaurs going in there, but I will definitely do some sort of habitat up there, so it makes sense, and to have multiple habitats connected to each other through the water feature that is flowing through multiple habitats. Potentially I'm also gonna make a lagoon area where we will have maybe 1 or 2 lagoons where there's going to be aquatic species. I don't plan on doing a ton of these since the zoo is maybe a little bit more on the smaller side. Obviously it's going to be pretty big because we work with dinosaurs and they have big habitats, but I don't want to include like a whole bunch of different species. We're going to keep the pure number of habitats relatively low. We will not have all of the species in this zoo, especially the flying and the water species or swimming species are barely gonna be in here. As I said, gonna do like maybe 1 or 2 lagoons, and then when it comes to the aviaries for the flying dinosaurs, I will also do maybe 1 or 2, but not too many to just not make too much. Once we finish this zoo at some point, I will do a different zoo, of course. I will not stop once this zoo is finished, but I personally don't want to overdo it. I want to build a zoo that is manageable, and also where I will not take like 2 years to finish this whole thing. I definitely want to finish this in just a couple of months, so that I can actually call one project finished. With Planet Zoo, for example, I never really had a finished project or a finished zoo, which is somewhat of a bummer because I also had always like really big zoos, and at some point I kind of abandoned them because they didn't really fit like my style or how I'm building. Of course, my building skills or my style is evolving how long I'm playing the game for, so surely the first episode of a project is not going to be the same quality as the like 20th episode of that. So to also keep it really simple for me and to be able to completely finish this project, I will not do like a ginormous zoo, but after that I will definitely do different ones, so then I can also play around with themings. And also starting new zoos and starting new projects also comes with new motivation, so that's why I also think that is much more manageable for me personally, for my lifestyle and also for my motivation, because I tend to lose my motivation relatively quickly. So that's maybe a more sufficient way and more manageable way for me to keep up with the Jurassic World game and also with the episodes for YouTube, because they are doing pretty well, which is making me extremely happy right now, and I just want to keep up posting videos. Right now, as you can see, I'm also building a little viewing area or viewing gallery for guests that are not actually visiting the restaurant. I didn't want to only give the view to the Dimetrodon habitat for guests that are actually visiting the restaurant and going to eat there. So I built like this tiny viewing area that is going to be a little bit next to the restaurant, where guests can also see the animals. I tried to place it in a way that they would not directly look at the restaurant, because there's like this, I would say, rule that guests in a zoo, when they are looking at the habitat or inside the habitat, should not be able to see other guests in different viewing areas. So I tried to keep that in mind and kind of place it in a way that they would not directly look at the restaurant, and also the guests that are sitting on the terrace from the restaurant are not looking at the guests that are standing at the viewing gallery. this area is also not really big. There's not like a ginormous path where they can take a look inside of the habitat, but I feel like this is still a really nice way to also give other guests the opportunity to see the dinosaurs, and that the habitat is not only exclusive for guests from the restaurant. And lastly, for the habitat for the Dimetrodon, I wanted to keep the rest of the habitat relatively arid, since from like the information about the Dimetrodon in this game, they wish to have, of course, the deep water and mostly arid, like an arid biome. So I tried to stick with that. I just like to take a look at their information. I'm not going to be 100% accurate with it, but it definitely helps me to decide what style I want to have the habitat, or what biome and what foliage and so on I want to have for that. And since they mostly wanted to have arid, I did take that into consideration and left the whole habitat relatively open. I used the arid terrain brush and then just added a few more foliage pieces to complete that, but overall it is really simple. And we are almost at the very end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and that you like the way I designed this habitat and also this restaurant. Leave a like if you did, and leave a comment on what you think about this habitat, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any more videos about Jurassic World Evolution 3, and stay tuned for the next episode. I will now leave you with the cinematic shots of the finished results, so stay tuned a couple more minutes to see the finished restaurant, the finished habitat, and all the other little details that I added later on. I'm now gonna say my goodbyes, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Until then, bye guys!